Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us here on KXAN Live. I'm Will Dupree, coming to you from the KXAN Live studio on this incredibly gorgeous Monday afternoon. We wanted to tell you about something that's happening tomorrow. In case you had not heard, tomorrow will be the official start of yet another legislative session here in Texas. So much to cover. And a lot of the state lawmakers who were elected and won their races back in November will gather at noon on Tuesday to start their work at the Texas Capitol. If you're curious at all about what's going to happen on this very first day of the session, we're here to answer a few of those questions. So joining us this afternoon is Lauren McGahee. She is a political investigative reporter with the Dallas Morning News. Lauren, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to do this.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
First question right out the gate. How are you feeling about the session starting tomorrow? It's finally here, right?
I think everyone always feels a little unprepared going into these sessions. State lawmakers only meet once every 2 years, which means they have 2 years of work to catch up on. And so it's kind of a whirlwind, and the day before you just try to rest a lot and get ready for a very busy few months.
We just had a bit of news to share about 30 minutes ago or so. The Texas Comptroller discussed how much money will be in the budget for the lawmakers to deal with this time, and we found out that there will be a budget surplus, the biggest ever, of $32.7 billion. We pretty much expected that there would be a surplus for this session, but maybe not to this level. Can you talk about what the reaction is to this?
Sure. This is pretty remarkable, actually. If you think about some other states are actually facing budget shortfalls, and we having the biggest surplus that we've seen is unusual. But there is a caveat here. There are some very high-powered people in the state, namely Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, who is the president of the Senate, who, while he has acknowledged that the surplus is large and there's a lot that the state could do with that there are some constitutional spending caps, and that he does not actually want lawmakers to spend all of that money, because this, isn't something that we may be able to rely on in 2 years' time. So there's a lot of caution coming from the state's Republican leaders on being optimistic about using that money, but just letting people know that it's not all going to get spent this year.
Obviously, we will wait to see what that revenue will go toward in this next session. But what are some of the things that are being floated right now that would go toward?
The most obvious proposal that is coming from nearly all of the Republican leaders at this point is some kind of relief for property owners. As you might know, if you own your home here in Texas, we don't have an income tax. So a lot of the burden on property revenue, on tax revenue, comes in the form of property and sales taxes. And so, we've seen those property taxes really go up pretty markedly in recent years, and Republican leaders across the board want to provide some relief for property owners this year. We're not quite sure what that will look like. There's some discussion of raising the homestead exemption. But that is yet to be seen exactly what will come out of that. But some of that budget surplus will definitely be used for property tax relief.
Of course, we will be following what all that will pay for potentially in the months ahead. But let's just focus on tomorrow. The official start of the session begins at noon. What kinds of ceremonial things will happen? Because that will be a large part of the day tomorrow.
That's right. So we'll see some swearing-in ceremonies. The big inauguration ceremony won't happen until next week, but there'll be a lot of people showing up to the Capitol tomorrow to see their local elected officials be sworn in. We have some first-time historical elected officials taking their oath of office this year. The first Muslim will be taking his oath of office, and there's going to be a number of Muslim Texans coming to see him. We also are going to see the highest number of openly LGBT elected lawmakers take the oath of office, and so there'll be a special gathering for that as well. So just a lot of people celebrating, the process of democracy and seeing their local elected officials take that oath to uphold the state and national constitution.
The 150 members of the Texas House of Representatives also have a responsibility to elect a Speaker of the House. There doesn't seem to be too much surprise with how this vote will go, but who is expected to come out on top tomorrow?
So this isn't DC. We're not expecting to see a repeat of what happened recently in the halls of Congress. We are expecting the Speaker of the House, Dade Phelan, to be reelected. There was a meeting of Texas House Representatives before the session, and he does appear to have the necessary support to be reelected. So that we'll wait to make sure that that is actually what's going to happen tomorrow. But it's very, very unlikely that we would see a repeat of what happened up in DC here in Texas. There's a much more agreement over who's going to take the helm of the House here in the state.
Yeah, that was my next question for you, is how much should we anticipate any kind of drama like what we saw unfold at the U.S. Capitol?
Very little, although there could be some debate over the House rules, which is just more of a procedural thing. There also will probably be some pushback over issues like Democrats taking the helm at certain high-powered committees in the Texas House. That's something that the Texas Republican Party is opposed to, but has historically always taken place. So we'll see if those fights play out on the sidelines.
One thing that we are awaiting is for Governor Greg Abbott to lay out what his legislative priorities will be for the state lawmakers. Is there any expectation about when that could come? Presumably at any moment, right?
That's right. He usually waits a few weeks. The governor is the one person who can actually name emergency items that can be debated in the first several weeks of the session. The first several weeks are usually more ceremonial. Committees get set up, but they don't start a debate on actual bills. That is not the case for his emergency items. So if he comes out tomorrow, which is unlikely, but if he comes out tomorrow and lays out what his priorities are, lawmakers could file those bills or could start debating those bills right away. So we'll have to see what he puts at the top of his agenda. Right now, we know what Dan Patrick, the president of the Senate's basic agenda is, and we'll probably also see some priorities from the new House Speaker as well.
We, of course, have to watch out for all that. Has Governor Abbott given any kind of breadcrumbs in a way leading to what his priorities might be?
Again, the property tax issue is a priority for the governor. We also might see some discussion of border security, border funding. This is mostly a federal issue, but here at the state, we can use state tax dollars to funnel cash. Obviously, we've had Operation Lone Star that's been active on the Texas-Mexico border for many months, and we might see a proposal from the governor again to funnel state money into that border security effort, which the governor has made as clear as one of his priorities during his recent reelection campaign.
Another thing that popped up in your reporting just last week was the access that reporters will have to the Texas Senate floor. What exactly was shared? And this really has raised questions about how transparent the process might be without letting reporters get kind of closer to the action.
That's right. This is my fifth session in Texas, so I'm coming up on a decade here, and the press has historically enjoyed some access to both the Senate and the House. And in the Texas House, there's a couple of press tables where the press can stand. The press has also been able to stand outside of the railings in the Texas House and maybe not do interviews there, but at least be able to very closely view and sometimes interview elected officials. But during the pandemic, the Texas Senate decided to not allow the press to sit on the Senate floor as they have been able to historically, and we weren't allowed to be in the back hallway of the chamber where a lot of senators come and go, and that has really hampered our ability to access senators who, enjoy incredible power in the state over the laws that are passed that affect everyday Texans' lives. So we're really seeing a huge disparity in terms of media access and transparency between the Texas House and the Texas Senate in the last couple of sessions, and that doesn't appear to be getting any better.
Perhaps that will change, but we'll have to wait and see on that too. As we're anticipating what will unfold in these next few months, again, the legislative session begins officially tomorrow. What do you think are going to be the dominant issues? You mentioned earlier property tax reform in some way, perhaps border initiatives, another issue. But what do you think will be kind of top of mind for lawmakers in the months ahead?
So we'll have to see again what Governor Abbott's emergency items will be and what the Texas House Speaker sets as his priorities. That will really drive a lot of the discussion this year. But some of the other ideas that have been floated by Dan Patrick, who's already released his priorities, are a focus on education. Specifically, he's floating the idea of a parents' rights bill that has been popular in some other states. And there's not a ton of detail on what that might look like at this point, but it'll probably deal with the ability of a parent to determine what their student, what their child hears in school, especially public K-12 schools. There's also going to be some target on tenure for university professors. That is something that Dan Patrick has also floated as one of his priorities. In addition to that, we might see some discussion about school safety after Uvalde. It's unlikely that we'll see any real pulling back on the state's very permissive gun laws, but there might be some discussion of funneling some of that property, state revenue into so-called school hardening, which, is for their metal detectors, fencing, that kind of thing around schools. And then we might see some additional discussion of election bills, which were sucked a lot of the oxygen out of the room during the 2021 session. And we might see some additional discussion of the state's ban on abortion and whether might be a way to clarify some of the more confusing aspects of that law.
Laura McGahey is a political investigative reporter with the Dallas Morning News and has kindly made some time for us today to kind of walk through what we should expect starting tomorrow and in the months ahead. Lauren, before I let you go, though, I wanted to kind of leave the floor open to you. Is there anything that we didn't discuss that you wanted to mention to all of the people who are watching our live stream right now?
Ooh, soapbox time.
Exactly.
I would just say, a lot of attention is paid to Congress and to national elections, but your state legislator really has enormous amount of power to determine what laws are passed to influence your life. As we've seen more infighting in Congress and in DC, some of that power has shifted here to the state legislature. So if you don't know who your elected officials are, you can Google Who Represents Me Texas and find out who your state House member is and your state senator. And, get to know them a little bit, get to know what their policy perspectives are, and make sure that you're supporting your local news stations and your local newspapers who will be covering what they do this year.
Couldn't think of a better way to end that. So Lauren McGahey, with the Dallas Morning News, thank you again for joining us. We appreciate it, and good luck tomorrow and in the months ahead.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, you can read more about our ongoing coverage about this state budget surplus that we just got the figures in over on KXAN.com. Other additional state political coverage is available as well on our website, KXAN.com, and the KXAN News app, so we'll send you there. Thanks again for watching here this afternoon. I'm Will Dupree in the KXAN Live studio. See you all back here soon. Enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. Take care.